we need to talk about 8 strings. Even though they're relatively popular these days, there's still a lot of misconceptions about them. Apparently, a bunch of people think this is a bass for some reason. This is my Schecter Tau 8, which is the John Brown from Monument's signature model, and I think it's awesome. All right, so far this video has kind of just been an excuse for me to talk about my cool blue guitar. But let's talk about some of the most common misconceptions about 8 strings. A lot of people try to hate on 8-string guitar players basically by saying something along the lines of, why don't you just play a bass? I guess they're assuming that tuning that low just equals a bass. And the truth is that this is rubbish, at least in a metal context anyway. One is a guitar and one is a bass, and they're treated very differently. I'll preface this by saying I am not a mix engineer, but while there is some crossover in frequencies, a guitar is still a guitar and a bass is still a bass, no matter how low it's tuned. If you look at the frequencies on a visualizer, you can actually see this, as the guitar is usually where the bass isn't. That's this big scoop right here. The bass on the left and the guitar on the right are playing in the same octave, but as you can see, they're not doing the same thing. Not a bass. Also, a bass isn't just bigger than an 8-string, it feels and plays very differently too. This low string is a 74 gauge, which by guitar standards is pretty thick, and this bass string is a 105 gauge, which is even thicker. They're tuned exactly the same, but the bass strings are so much thicker and the string tension is so much higher that they actually feel very different to play. Speaking as a guitar player and kind of a rubbish bass player, bending bass strings is hard. I always remember this clip of Cliff Burton just shredding away on his bass like it's easy for him. Just look at how far he's bending those strings. And yes, you can play an 8-string like a bass and a bass like an 8-string. Tosin Abasi is the perfect example. He's slapping and thumping away on 8 strings all day long, and it's awesome. But he's transferring bass techniques onto an 8-string guitar to make an interesting new sound, something that at the time hadn't really been done that much before. And it wouldn't really be that interesting or new if it really was just the same as a bass. You could make the argument that an 8-string and a bass are actually just stringed instruments and are actually very similar. But to me, that feel also matters. 8-string and basses feel different to play, and because of that, they sound different too. Not a bass. Also, if an 8-string really is just a bass, why do so many bands that use 8 strings still have a bass player? And if it's the tuning which is the problem and not the 8-string itself, then why do so many bands that tune as low as 8 strings still have bass players too? Periphery, bass player. Arcspire, bass player. Monuments, bass player. Sleep Token, bass player. Meshuggah, the ones who started it all, still have a bass player. And even bands that don't have a bass player, like Animals as Leaders, still have a mixture of programmed and real bass on their albums, and they use backing tracks live. I feel like the conspiracy theory guy in that GIF right now. I guess the point I'm making is that even in low-tuned bands, whether they use 8 strings or just tuned down, bass still plays a big part in that sound, and it's not usually coming from the guitar. Not a bass! The other big criticism I see of 8-string guitar players is usually something along the lines of, you only use one string. What's the point if you only chug on the low string? I feel like this is such a non-issue, but we're going to talk about it anyway. There's never the same criticisms about Surfacing from Slipknot or Roots by Sepultura, both regular 6-string songs that chug primarily on the low string. I don't recall anyone loudly yelling at them in the comments saying they must use all of the strings. Although thinking about it, those 2 songs came out before social media was a thing, so there wouldn't have really been a comment section to loudly be yelling in. But you get my point, right? It's not about the number of strings, and you can use as many or as few as you want. It's up to you. Who cares if you're only using one of the strings or none of the frets? I actually did that, by the way. So 8 strings are actually no different from any other guitar. Tuning down doesn't really encroach on the bass player's territory. They're separate things. They're songwriting tools that are just designed to help you be creative. That's why Meshuggah started pushing these things in the first place. They wanted to tune lower. You can do what you want with them, and there are no rules. 1 string is fine, 8 string is fine. It doesn't matter. Shred, slap, thump, caveman, chug, it's all cool. Find the right one which gels with you and your style of playing. It took me a while, but I'm very pleased I gave this one a chance. It changed my mind and it brought me back to the world of 8 strings. And it's definitely not a bass.